My name is Jesse Cameron. I have been drawing for about 6 years now. I'm also in year 3 of medicine, so I know a thing or two about anatomy, which is quite important when it comes to character illustration, which is my main focus in art. I'm also starting to get into animation and VTube modeling and rigging, which is super challenging, but man, is it rewarding. And, I hope as you guys, start learning how to draw that you can find the same satisfaction in it as I do as well. I'm here to just share a little bit of what I know, help you guys with whatever you're stuck on, set the groundwork for learning how to draw. We're gearing towards anime character illustrations. Excellent. It does not matter what medium you're using. Use whatever is at hand. It will be, digital art focused, but you do not need a single art program or drawing tablet or expensive fancy pencils or drawing materials. Because a little bit about my history is for the first 3 years of owning my digital tablet, I didn't use it. I was still drawing every day, but the lessons I was getting from these digital art YouTubers was still practical to me on pencil and paper. And over time, I, grew enough confidence to start using the digital tablet. Felt like I was finally worthy enough for it. And then, after 3 years of owning it and not using it, I finally put my pen digital stylus onto the gloss, and then I permanently scratched, this brand new tablet because I didn't know how to use it or how much pen pressure to apply. So there were definitely some growing pains and some demons that I had to overcome before I could fully get into digital art. And if I could have you guys walk away with anything from the session or this class, it would be that digital art and trad art, the worst parts of yourself will manifest and try to hold you back while you're drawing. And what we are going to do is we're going to equip you guys with literally a sword and a shield, and we're going to battle. And I'm going to show you guys for yourself how to overcome those obstacles, how to face against, those negative thoughts of your art not being good enough, or comparing with other artists, or dealing with the lack of inspiration or burnout or procrastination. And honestly, that feeling of self-improvement, regardless of whether or not your art improves, that self-improvement helps you outside of the context of drawing. Because those same, yeah? Both. Let's do both. Yeah. And, all right. So, we're going to start with pencil and paper, and I'm going to show you guys kind of how we can take the concepts of digital art and apply it to pencil and paper, and then how that'll help us with doing digital art. So let's just shrink me here. There we go. That's good enough. Let's grab Clip Studio up here. Chuck this over here. New paper. All right, so these are my layers. We're gonna go here, pick a black. All right. When I have a pencil and paper in front of me, we're gonna have the piece of paper here, and generally the way people say is, oh, you start with a lighter pencil like a 2H, and then you can do the sketch on the piece of paper, and then you use maybe a darker a 2B pencil or a pen, and that's how you do the line art. So generally, you can break down any illustration into a sketch, and then the CH, and then into the line art, whatever. We're going to do that. And for that, I'll represent that with a different brush. There we go, this one. This is now my line art brush, and then, then I can put in the details here. You can do the same thing in digital art, of course, obviously, you saw it here, but you can also add layers. So on top of this piece of paper, I have, another drawing. And what I want to do is I can lower the opacity of this one to then draw my line art on the second layer of paper, right? Animators did this in traditional, like, old Disney animation movies, they used to do all of the animation in celluloids, which is the same concept. Celluloid is a plastic film of like animation paper that they would use, and they would have different layers. Like one layer might be the line art, and then, or let's have the line art be up here. So this is like our smiley face here, and then underneath would be the colors. And what I'm showing you guys is the ability to separate things over here, which is the layers on any digital art program has it, basically. If you're using like Clip Studio, which is what I'm currently running, Photoshop has it, or a free alternative would be like Krita, which I highly recommend. I do know there's also like GIMP and Fire Alpaca. There's also Paint Tool Sai. They all offer about the same range and set of like tools. And they all have this layering system. So for example, I can create a new layer here, and I might draw my smiley face, right? And then I can create a new layer here, and I'm going to put it underneath, right? And I'm going to select a color, like a skin tone, sure. And you'll see that when my skin tone is underneath this layer, it's perfectly fine. We can still see the line art. And when I put it on top, it's all of a sudden it's hidden, right? And animators would use this to then we would have the color on this layer, and then we'd add another layer for shadows. So this would be my shadow layer, and I can like, whatever, I'll pick like a slightly darker, this looks like a dark color, right? And then you can see that now if we just look at the context of the face, we have light and we have shadow. But obviously it's super messy, and this is not how it would be rendered, because it's really difficult. It's like, oh, how are we staying in the lines and everything? So that's where clipping layers come into play. Clipping layers is where I have any block of color. Let's grab a gray here. Let's use a different pen. Right, this. I have this circle here. So this is all old stuff. We're gonna just group that and hide it for now. We're gonna add a new layer. And on Krita, it might have its own like separate icon. On Clip Studio, it's this button, clip to layer below. What's really nice about this is now it formed like this red bar on the side of the layer. So it means that anything that I draw in this new layer is only going to clip to where I've drawn here. So for example, now let me choose a red here. See? Now it's staying in the lines. And then imagine I had another layer on top with, you know, my line art. Choose and go back to black, you know. So then, you know, this is my line art. And this is my line art here. This could have been my shadows, and this could have been my skin color. Okay. So we can talk about layer order. So for layers, order matters, because then we can do clipping. Clipping masks. Excellent. Another thing that matters is opacity. Opacity means how transparent it is. So this red is fully opaque. I can't see any of the gray background. But if I go here and I lower this 100%, all of a sudden I can see the gray that's behind it. So now it's at 38% opacity. That'll be useful when we want to control how dark or how light our shadows are. Okay. Another thing is blending modes. So we're going to go back here. Blending modes. In anime styles, there's basically like three most important blending modes. We have normal, which, as you expect, is the color that I choose is the color it's going to be, and there's no mathematical calculation of how one layer is going to make an effect over another layer, right? The next one is multiply. This is typically used for shadows. Multiply for shadows. And then the next layer, the next one would be add. This is typically done for highlights. In Clip Studio, there's this other mode called add glow. So we have add here. I also have add glow. Another one that they often use is like color dodge. They all kind of do similar operations. And I'll just put here highlights. There we go. We have like the flat colors. I'll put flats here. It's just so it's consistent. These are my flat colors. Like I want to establish the skin tone. I want to make the apple red. But then I can have shadows be one mode and add be another blending mode. And I'll show you what those look like. So I don't know, let's exaggerate it. So let's have this at 100%, or we can do 50. And we can do multiply. And what it's going to do is it's going to take those RGB values and literally do mathematics and multiply, you know, the red value times this gray value, and it's going to output a blackish red. And we're not going to get into that. We don't need to analyze it that deeply. If you want to read more, like you can go into the website about Clip Studio or Krita and it'll explain it there. For add glow, you can see now it's got like this lighter effect. There's a ton of other ones. Divide. When you take this gray color and you divide red, what you're left with is blue. And, you know, that gets into like complementary colors. Right. That'll be that. So one idea that you could do is when I'm painting or drawing in traditional art, we can have like, you know, a layer to be our sketch and our line art, and then you can layer on another piece of paper and have like a light shine through and like show us how to do the next set of drawings. And that's like used in animation and stuff. I suppose that's less relevant in this context, but you know, there is also other dockers for doing animation here. Like when I was doing the Ryobi is the moth here, and you can do all of those fancy things. Let's move on. So what programs do you guys primarily use for digital art? Photoshop, all right. And Krita. Hell yeah. All right, Toby just had to step away for a sec. No worries, no worries. All right. Now, let's get into actually how this would look in a practical example, illustrating an actual character. Let's see, so this one could be interesting. So here's an example of kind of like anime rendering in a real photograph. So this was like a Sunday morning. I was eating ice cream on the roof and I took this photograph. And I thought, how cool would it be to render anime style characters in this lighting? So that was the challenge, right? And it was a bit of trial and error, but I finally kind of got the idea of how to do cell shading, but still make it feel like it's fitting in a real environment with these colors. Cell shading is defined as having a delineated border between the lights and the shadows. You can clearly tell that this is a shadow shape and this is a light shape. But with the development of technology and stuff, we can add gradients within the shadows to make it look like there's more volume. So for example, in this knee here, we have where the sun is hitting the front of the knee, And then this is clearly where the shadow is. But within the shadow, it's lighter here, and it gets darker where it starts to join with the hips. Yeah, what's up? Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of different ways that we can approach that. For example, copying like a reference. So like the picture that I'm referencing from, maybe the subject has already a sun or a light source established, and then we just look at kind of the shape language that's being used here. So like, you see how the sun is hitting mainly this character's chest? So I know then I kind of want this face of the chest to be in shadow. And the same, I'm just doing the same thing here in the arm. How do I know that? By looking at the reference and seeing where they put their shapes. There is another approach. This one's a lot more academic. We can illustrate this here. So, do you know about perspective? How to set up a plane in perspective? Sure. Well, we can also set up like a light source as well. So like if this is our sun here, this is our new vanishing point. So if I have like, I don't know, a cylinder here like that. If I have a cylinder like this, oof, I'm struggling right now. We have a cylinder. All right, there we go. So now like this will then be this point here, this point here, like that. Then now I know this is where my shadow shape is going to sit. Thank you. Yeah, I would highly recommend reading some books on how to. There is information on how to precisely calculate how this angle acts as a new vanishing point to put the shadows on. Because obviously this is just like, honestly, this isn't even a cylinder. This is just a flat rectangle. But now we can get really complicated. Like imagine if it were like a cube and we have like these inside shapes, and then how do we project these shapes to still look like the cube? You see? So then this is now going to be the warped shadow shape here, over here. If that makes sense. And that's why shadows looked warped. Yeah. Because this line connects with that one, you know, this line connects with that one, and this one with that one. And then all of those lines are heading towards, you know, this vanishing point. Exactly. Exactly, yeah. And that's happening in this other picture as well. I just lost. Where did it go? Oh, was it? It was just right here. All right. So then technically, this is a bit simplistic, right? Maybe, okay, hang on, wait, let's see. If I had, what layer am I on? Just add a new layer right here. Technically, this is my knee shape right here. And we're going to call this a cube. We're just going to call this a cube because why not, right? But then this is like another plane, right? So then this is a small plane, I guess. And then it goes back down here. So it's making these steps, right? What we can do is I could probably take this point here and then create like a vector. Because like the sun is hitting the knee here. And then everything here is going to be in shadow until it reaches this point again, right? And then we can take this point here and we can create another angle. And then these two as well will eventually be able to merge to the, you know, somewhere where the sun might be over here. And those are the vanishing points to cast that shadow. It's very rough. I would only use this if I was like trying to be very precise with it, but honestly, to calculate the vanishing point of every single shadow shape would take too long. for this level of quality, I'm doing a very rough guess estimation of where I think the shadows would be if the sun was here. But then I'm like kind of doing ray tracing, I guess, is because like the sun's coming from up here, it's gonna hit the chin here, and I was like, okay, where would it land after it's done hitting the chin? And I'm kind of just tracing those rays and like sort of that's where I'm gonna plot where the shadow shapes are gonna be. Yeah. Here you can see it again. So the sun is coming from this top right corner. It's hitting the little tip of this hair shape and it's casting this shadow. So then this shadow is kind of alluding to where it's kind of all pointing in vanishing points of where I think, you know, the sun is coming from. No. So when we look at this one, we see that it isn't. This might be a darker opacity and a darker value, and this one's lighter. And that's what gives us the illusion of volume there. And it's really easy to do. It's actually not that hard. Have you heard of ambient occlusion? Like in video game settings? Have you seen the difference between when it's on and when it's off? Yeah, when it's off. And that's because there's a theory that when two objects are closer together, less light can bounce in between them to illuminate this space. Or like maybe like the sun hits a particle of dust and the particle of dust is able to hit this face, and that's why this face is bluer, and maybe this face, because it's catching the sun, this would be a little bit of yellow, and then all of the rest might be blue, and it would get darker here because less of the light can bounce in between the space. And then imagine that these two boxes were even closer together. Now even less rays can get in between here. So ambient occlusion is this knee and this knee are really separated from each other. But as we get closer to the hips, the same thing is occurring. So there's this much distance here, this much distance there, and much more closer distance as we get to the center union point, right? No. I'm just talking in relation to the two knees. When they're closer together, when these 2 points are closer together, they're going to get darker because less light can, because of the hips. We have the one hip here, and then the knee, right? And then the knee. Yeah? Oh, I'm just showing like this, the union point. So for example, hang on, can we do a top-down view of the legs? So we have a sitting person, right? This would be their backside, and then we have, their legs are open like this, okay? This is just a very simple, their legs are open, right? So then the sun, yeah, their legs are open here, right? So then the sun can hit here, and then maybe it'll bounce like twice. But then if the sun tries to hit here, there's less and less space for that bounce light to occur. So maybe like bounce light can hit this one really easily, but then it's going to get harder and harder to get in between the legs. So as we're going in between the legs and this cylinder gets closer to this cylinder, it's going to get darker here. And then lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. Exactly, yeah. Same thing is happening to this leg. Yeah, it's cool. See? This is less opaque. And this is really dark because we're underneath this shirt and we're, you know, by these bricks. And that's why this is darker and it gets lighter and lighter and lighter as we get exposed to more and more of the sky. Exactly. So that's like perspective, that's lighting done. We're doing all of the hard stuff first. I was just going to talk about the easy stuff. Yeah, exactly. So, I wanted to show the layer organization. This just looks like a PNG, so I opened the wrong one. Let's see. Oh, by the way, that was like my fourth attempt. Let me open it from, like, I definitely have struggled to draw as well. This is like the fourth iteration. So I tried doing this, let's say on month 0, and I got really disappointed that it didn't come out how I wanted it in my head. And so I just left it. I came back a full month later and retried it. Still didn't work out. And then I tried it again and again until eventually it turned out like this. I'm just trying to find it again. Ooh, was it there? It opened it in a new window. So this was my first attempt. So I've definitely come a long way. And I think you guys might relate to this. Sometimes you just have a great idea, and for as much as you try, it's just not quite there. And I want to let you guys know that it's real, it happens, it's okay. You just have to give yourself some grace and do a little bit more studying and then come back, when you feel recharged enough to potentially fail again. So if I were to break this down, I thought, oh, real life has really desaturated colors. So I'm going to use just really like cold colors here. The jacket's bluish. This is like a gray and the hair is yellow, right? And I showed it to my friends and they're like, yeah, okay, maybe it needs to be a bit more saturated because the orange is really bright. So I tried again. And yeah, maybe I fixed some of the hair colors, tried doing the skin tone a bit better. But when I showed this to my friend, yeah, they couldn't identify the character's gender. They thought this was a girl and this was a guy. So I was like, oh, well, that's a bit failed. So I let it go. And then so this was like month 0, month 1. And the next month, I redid all of the poses. So I opened his legs to give him more of a masculine pose. And I closed her legs to give her more, not incredibly, just a slightly more hourglass shape, exaggerated by the knees coming together and then splitting apart here. That's like another hourglass. You got 2 hourglasses there. And you'll see a lot of anime poses do that as well. But again, I was still hooked on this, like, oh, it's got to be desaturated. And then, like 4 months later or whatever, I come back and I finally cracked how to do the cell shading illustration style. Let's see. Yeah, I was hoping, let's see, hopefully my file structures, like if I examine my layers, like they're completely unintelligible. Hopefully we can break this down in a intelligent way. This is just post-processing. You'll see when I toggle these layers on and off, like this is just some add glow to give it more of a bloom effect, which I really like. Same thing here. That's not doing anything. All right, that's got the entire character in it. But it's still just PNGs. So we're going to hide all of that. We're going to hide all of that and hopefully find get some of the shadows there. Okay, there we go. We're getting somewhere. This is without the shadow shapes. You can see these are the flat colors, but what you'll notice is they're not entirely flat. Even though so the flat colors are basically where we put the distinguishing colors. Like I want the hair to be yellow. I want the skin to be pink. I want the jacket to be black and the jeans to be blue. But within there, I'm adding like textures and gradients. No textures here, but like the fingers and anatomically now have more like different blood vessel structure so that there's more like perfusion in the fingertips, so it's going to be slightly more red here. There's also more perfusion at the tips of the ears, on the tip of the nose, and the cheek. So that's where I'm adding like this warmer color, and it gets colder. Same thing with the hair. We don't have blood vessels, but at least like it's going to be browner, darker at the ends here, and I chose to be lighter according to where the light source was going to go be. Same with the jeans. It's lighter at the knees, and then darker at the hip. That was my first attempt, probably. Let's see. We get rid of all of this stuff. There we go. That's our. Yes, this is the folder that we want to see. All right. Okay. This is good. So, if we turn this off, what I did was basically, you can see that these are my flats and my line art right here in this picture. And then we're just looking at the next layer. So right above it is this blue shadow, and it's in multiply. So what it's doing is, if I change this back to normal, okay, that didn't do what I expected it to do. That's because it's also multiply here. There we go. This is what normal is. What I was explaining earlier. These are the flats, and then this is just an entire block of blue, right? But now here is, instead of it being a layer, it's an entire folder of stuff. But when I set this entire folder to multiply, you see it takes the flat colors and multiplies them with blue. And so now it's yellow and blue. It's pink and blue. And then what I did here is I added a clipping mask to erase away the light. So this step is just establishing the shadow color. It doesn't matter what it is or how good it is or how, fake and dry it looks. And then I carve away where I want the shadow shapes to be. The next step is then taking these colors, like for example, I want the shadows of these fingers to not be blue. I want them to be more orange and warmer toned. And, same applies for the hair. I want the hair to be more orange and warmer toned, but I can still have blue shadows for the jacket because it's not an organic material. So then there you can see that was my first pass. And I got some of that saturation back into the face, and it looks a lot more warmer and a lot more alive compared to this. It looks like my previous attempts. Whereas this is just like, okay, it was something different. I added the blush back. And that's about that for this folder. Okay, I think we've extracted the knowledge that we can take from this image. I'm going to show you this again with some other drawings. Let's see. Maybe. Look here. I think this is the folder with a lot of the Luna fan art. And I think that's very relevant for this server. So we'll look at this one. These were the 4 illustrations I did for the start of like the Discord stuff. Some of them are better than others. But yeah, we'll look at this one because it's got some nice rendering on it. This is it. Okay. Get rid of all the push processing. Let's get rid of the background, whatever. We don't need that. We're just going to work backwards real quick. Yeah. Until we get to the flats. That's the goal. There we go. That looks pretty flat for now. Turn that on as well. All right, so we got the line art and some flat colors, but you'll notice they're not all that flat. They have a lot of gradients onto them. Let's see if we can have a look at those. So, okay, yeah. So this was the color. We're just looking at the shoulder, let's say. This is the flat color that I had picked for Luna's shoulder. And you'll see, this is that color right there. And on top of it, I then added a clipping mask, and I used an airbrush to add some of the warmth back into the shoulder, the breasts, and the cheeks. And then I did that with every, piece of like distinguishable flat color. So we can see this is the hair that I'm toggling on and off. I wanted it to be white hair, but I have 2 clipping layers to add some of that gray ambient occlusion back in. So without like those were the flat colors. And then I just started by adding, just airbrushing in some gradients into the flat colors. And it adds a lot to the illustration before you've even started rendering. Same thing with the eyes. You can see that I wanted it to be blue and I wanted this one to be red. And then I airbrushed back in kind of a bit more depth to, like, I wanted specifically this part of the eye to be blue and this to be more saturated, going towards purple. Okay, so those are the flats done. Then the next step is to do multiply stuff to get those shadows in, right? So you can see I'm using groups of stuff here, but it's the same thing. This was our flat color layer, and on top of it, we have this red bar, which in Clip Studio, it means it's clipping to below. If I unclipped it, you can see my shadows, there we go. Technically, this shadow is leaking out. But then if I clip it back on, now I'm all of a sudden, quote unquote, drawing in the lines. You know, I'm not outside of the shape. So that's what the clipping layer does. And so now everything in here is then clipped to its own thing. So let's look at the hair again. You'll notice that this is cell shading still. This is, light is hitting this one. There's no shadow on this. But within here, you know, there is shadow. But when we look at the top of the hair, and you'll see this in anime a lot, is the shadows here are much, much, much softer. You can hardly tell the difference between light and shadow. And again, the way I do that is through these clipping masks. So we're going to disable it. And there we go. You can see all of the shadows largely have the same opacity. You can see that the color of this shadow is pretty close, if not the same, to the color of this shadow. So then what I did was I erased away some of this opacity, like that, by using a clipping mask. And then another layer, clipping to the hair shadow, to add, in this case, a bit more ambient occlusion around the neck. And then same thing applies to the skin. Yeah, let's do that. This. Okay. So we're going to look at the cheeks and the neck, I guess. We're going to turn this off as well. There we go. So all we're looking at is where I placed my shadow shapes. There we go. You can see I wanted some shadow on the cheeks. It didn't matter what color it was. I could have used blue here. Like, I literally could have used, let's grab this here. I could have done all my shadows in blue. It wouldn't have mattered because on top of it, I'm applying this one, which is colorizing my shadows. So step one is just establishing where I want the shadow. So this, we have this piece of hair here, and the shadow is just going to be on the cheek underneath it, right? And then I'm going to erase away the parts that I don't need using this clipping mask, and then on top, colorize it to the local colors that I want it to be. And you know, if you look at the shoulder here, you can see it's that really cold, you know, it's just a gray. Maybe it looks fine, but you can add some saturation back in. And, you know, following that concept of ambient occlusion, the sun is going to hit here and bounce here a lot. So this will be a lot lighter. But as we, you know, go into the clavicle and these overlaps of these shapes, it's going to get darker and darker. Right. We're going to turn everything on there. You can also colorize the line art. I think that adds a lot of softness back in. This is what it's without. This is what it's back in. And then add glow is how I added the highlights. You can see it makes a big effect in the eyes. And then the last part is just post-processing, adding the bloom effect back in. And then ultimately, I think my final result was this one. One second, it keeps on opening on a different window. There we go. So now when we look at this illustration, we can see, oh, there's all of this fancy bloom effect. We don't need to worry about that. That's just airbrushing in like white or whatever. But even though this is technically cell shading, the takeaway is that within the shadows, we have gradients of opacity and color. And so then when we go back to this here, I was saying the exact same thing here, just in a really boring way. We have clipping. So when we're talking about layers, order matters for clipping masks, opacity for shadows, and blending modes, whether we're doing a normal, multiply, or add for flats, shadows, and highlights respectively. Talked about doing shadows. So that's basically how we render things in anime style. We can also really talk about like the workflow of creating original like content, but I'd first like to hear about you guys. If you have any questions up until here, just answer anything that you might have. You didn't understand anything, just let me know before we move on in topics. Let's see. I'll do a demonstration right here with just like a sphere. Add a layer. It doesn't matter what color this sphere is going to be, right? I'm going to choose this green, right? Sure, this is my sphere, right? On top of it, I'm going to have line art. Like that, like that, like that. Okay. Now, on top of this one, I can add like a colorize. So I'm going to group this like that. So now anything in this group, I want to flip to the green. So now I have this layer here, right? And so now I can say, I want the sphere person, I actually want them to have a skin color. So I'm going to choose like a skin color here. There we go. And maybe I'll change the background so it's not so blinding. There we go, that's better. All right, so we have our little dude here. And we have this group that's clipping this color. Yeah, I can turn off the group. There you go. You can see how bad I was at staying in the lines, right? Turn it back on. So the step one is establishing flat colors. We'll write that down. That's very important. So we're going to go 5. So steps to rendering. We can do it in red, I guess. Rendering steps. 1 is doing the sketch and then doing the line art, which we talked about here. Second is establishing flat colors. And then we can add gradients. Gradients according to ambient occlusion, and like if it's a natural or like if it's a warmer like skin tone, or if it's just a piece of clothing, it could be like towards red or towards blue. Ambient occlusion. Okay. 3 would be shadows. So this is when we talk about multiply layers, and we can add all of this jazz. Opacity and color. Sure. 4 could be highlights. And the same thing as shadows, the same opacity and color. 5 can be post-processing. All right, so let's see what it looks like with this little circle dude. One sec. Yeah, what's up? Thank you. Right. So let's say we already had done our sketch. This is now our line art. And this is going to be like our base. And on top of that, we did the skin tone. But now I want to add, clip to this 7, like that. I'll grab an airbrush. Let's see, is this an airbrush? Yeah, it's sort of an airbrush. There we go, that's an airbrush. I'm just brushing in some warmth here. And maybe I'll take some out. There we go. So I would call this my flats are done. So let's take that off. In blue, sure. So we did this, we did this, we did this, and we did this. According to ambient occlusion, or in this case, like, because I'm doing a warm color, I'm just going to make it more warm. Okay, now we're going to do shadows. So, what I could do is create a new layer. I don't want it to be in that group. Like that. There we go. So now I'm going to just rename this to shadows, sure, whatever. I'm going to set this to multiply. So this means that anything in this group is going to do the multiply operation. So if I take, for example, we're going to take this random blue color, right? And yeah, I'm just going to add this hard shadow. Yeah, here, why not? Like that. It's going to do that, right? And let's just show you the difference. If it wasn't on multiply and it was on normal, it's just this flat blue color. There's no change. And we can even unclip it, right? There we go. That's my color. But I clipped it. And then with multiply, you can see it's taking into account what's underneath. But obviously this blue is really unnatural. So, but we're going to get there, right? First is we've done the multiply. Brush. We've established where the shadow is. Why am I not coloring? Oh, because it's in the wrong layer. Multiply, set opacity. Oh, we haven't done it. We're going to do this now. So I'm going to add a clipping layer here, like this. And the way this works is we're going to go back to our airbrush, and I'm going to erase away this part of the shadow here. You don't have to use a clipping layer. You can see this is with it enabled and disabled. I could have just done it on this layer, but the benefit to doing this way, this non-destructive way, is now I can have them both enabled and I can go back and edit my shadows. So it's like, oh, I actually don't want it to be, you know, this angle. I want to clean up, you know, this a little bit more. And I can go back and, you know, I don't like the pixelatedness of it, so, you know, there we go. Or maybe I want to add some back in. You can see it's taking into account where I had previously erased it. Okay, so that's all good. I'm happy with the shadow, sure, doesn't matter. Opacity's done. Now to colorize it. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to clip to below. So now, anything, let's try to follow the logic here. Anything I draw in this layer is going to clip to this layer, and anything in this group, oh, my computer's thinking, anything in this group is now going to be clipping down to my base circle. So we're going to go and add some warmth. Maybe I want like a brownish. We'll see. Yeah, that'll do. Like that. Get an airbrush, and I can mess with kind of how dark and light everything is. Maybe I want to try a purple out and see how that looks. Maybe I want to do more of a yellow and see how that changes things. Ooh, that's nice. This is more of like a orangey skin tone, and it goes into more of a purpley shadow. Let's see how far we can push it. There we go. So that's how we add gradients into a shadow. Like that. Maybe I want to go back into the clipping layer and make it an even softer transition. So now it's like hardly even cell shading anymore. This is back into painting. All right, there we go. So now you can see the difference between without the colorizing and with the colorizing. That's the shadows done. And then on top of that, we can do the highlights. So add a new layer, group it, and clip it to below. Obviously, it's still in normal, but this time I want to set it to add, or Clip Studio has this other one called Add Glow, which adds a little bit of a nicer touch to it. It's all the same though. So I can take like a super dark color actually, and you can see that, I don't know, maybe because this color is like so blindingly bright, it's not going to really see much of an effect. This is very faint, but like maybe he's got a bald head, and so you can see kind of like the reflection of the light along his side of his body. Yeah, we can have more reflections there. And we can do the exact same thing. So this is where I want the reflections to be. I can add a clipping layer and do the exact same thing. I can erase away, like, oh, I don't want that much highlight in the shadow shape. So I'm going to erase away some of those highlights and some of these ones. So now I have a gradient in the highlights as well. And maybe I don't want it just to be this, you know, dry white color. Create a new layer, clip it there. So now I'm going to change the color of my highlights, and I can have it be blue, just for argument's sake, right? That didn't, there we go, it's the wrong layer. Right, and technically maybe that's a more blue, but it's, because it's such, oh, there you go, you can see it's being purple now. This is useful for like if I'm doing rim lighting and I have like a blue light source hitting the side of his face right here. And I have like an orange light source hitting this side of the face. And I can show you some drawings where that's being utilized. So sure, that's shadows, lighting, and then so we can say highlights are done as well. Done. Sorry, no post-processing. This is just something I like to do. So we're going to colorize the line art here, because the line art is looking a little bit static. So we can add a new layer and clip to below. So now anything I draw in this layer is only going to be real if it coincides with like where I've drawn on the line art. So I can take like this brown and I can colorize the line art here. We're just going to paint over everything right now. And then I'm going to change it to an airbrush. That. I can kind of follow the light source here. Maybe I want this to be even darker. Let's desaturate it more, make it more purple. Sure, and then I want like a red. Looks cool. And then I want this to be more saturated. Let's put it all the way into orange. Yeah, let's go further. Yeah, see how far we can push it? There we go. So now you can see this color is really going places. It's like a dark purple here or magenta, and it goes all the way to yellow here. Oh, I forgot to do the eyes. You can give them baby blue eyes. Oh, that's not right. No idea. Go add some highlights to the bottom of it. Sure. Oh, that's cursed. Nice. And that's just clipping to this one. Okay. It's kind of what the workflow looks like. So now we're going to throw all of this into a folder like that. Apparently it did not do what I said it to do. Drop. There. It's all in this folder. I'm going to duplicate this folder. Now I have 2 copies, and I'm going to just merge selected layer. There you go. So now it's just a PNG, essentially. That's all it's doing. And I'm going to set this, in my post-processing, I like setting this to add glow again, and I like duplicating it and setting it to hard light. Obviously, this looks insane. It does not look right. So I'm going to go back into add glow, set this to like 4, and the hard light can be at 25. All that did is just adjust the colors and boost them a little bit more. You can see that when I turn them off, you can see the skin tone is like very pink here. When it's back on, it just gives a slightly more boosted effect, and it makes the shadows also darker. You can adjust this according to your tastes. And we can like grab all of this. We can add like a bloom effect. So we can set this to add glow again with a, yeah, we're already on an airbrush. So I'll grab like a brown here. And we'll put this underneath everything. That. Let's grab like a blue. Sure. And maybe one on top. So now we have an over-rendered smiley face. Incredible. Let's see a practical example of this. Go into this one. Where's the file? Am I blind? Yes, I am. So this is when I did the illustration for kind of what I predicted the Luna model to be. You can see I filled in the blanks, so to speak. I took the silhouette and I rendered in an anime figure of kind of based on what they like. All right, this one is not relevant to us. Where is that folder? There we go. We don't need that one. And you'll see the same sort of structure here. Of course, it's just a ton more layers. But at the top, we have the post-processing, which I can turn off. That's all like the bloom effects that we don't need to see right now. And there we go. We have highlights here. And then within this folder, should find the multiply for the shadows. There it is. There we go. Yeah, turning off the shadows. And we're left with just hopefully the line art. Let me make sure though. Don't need any of these. Oops, that was just, no, I was right. View. Go back down to the skin. There it is. Okay. So if we just look at the skin, there we go. You can see that I selected this very, very light whitish red skin tone, sure. And I airbrushed, so these are my flat colors again. And I'm adding gradients to the flats. So on the shoulders, there's going to be more blood perfusion. So I just made it a bit more orange and, you know, blush on the cheeks and on the ears, on the fingers and the knees. Welcome back. Like that. And I did the same thing for the hair. You can tell it's lighter on the top of the head and darker around the chin with the ambient occlusion. Because like the light can easily reach the top of her head, but the light is going to have a harder time to bounce around and go behind the ear, for example. Same thing for the elbows and a little bit of airbrushing around the knees. Oh, and here as well. The light will have an easier time to hit this face, but it'll have a harder time to get into underneath this, I don't know what you'd even call that. Underneath the jacket. All right, we're just gonna use simple words. You can see I was debating having different colors, like a darker blue, a lighter blue, a pink, and I finally settled, I'll just keep it white. You can see I'm doing the same process, but for every material. You see it like here. Originally the moon was white and I just added a gradient of blue back in. Or, okay, never mind, it was originally blue and I added white back in. Okay, now we're going to do the shadows. You can see that's all of the shadows at the very end of the project, right? But we're going to work backwards a little. Let's see, what are you? Yeah, you're the skin. Okay. So we're going to go back to the shoulder here. Let's turn things off methodically. Let's turn you off. Right. So step one was just painting in where I thought light and shadow were going to be. There we go. So just with the curvature of the shoulder, and as we go into the pectoralis muscle and the breasts. And then we have the collarbone here. So this is the deltoid muscle into the pectoralis and towards the center of the neck. But the shadows, you know, on the tip of the ears are going to be much lighter than maybe the shadows by the thighs or down lower, right? So that's where this clipping layer comes into play. So disable. You can see that maybe up here, it's going to get lighter, and down here, it's going to stay the same. See if I'm right. There we go. So I airbrushed away the opacity. And then I'm going to add some color back in. There we go. I'm just adding some saturation back in. And that's how I do shadows. And I did that for every material. So that was for the skin. I did it to the jacket. You can see that really clearly here. Let's see if we can find the jacket. This looks like it. Oh boy. Yeah, it's easy. It's easy. Turn it off. So here you can see I was using like midtones. So I was just defining where I wanted the shadow shapes to be. So I took like this black or blue, whatever. I placed it here underneath the collar in the crease where it like goes from the breast into the shoulder, into the sleeve. Just getting it down where I wanted the shadows to be, right? And then we can add the opacity back, and that did like all of the work. So I was just erasing away how hard I wanted those shadows to be. You can see, so like, the easiest thing is to look at this. Right here, this is my shadow for the collar here. And then when I apply it, I erased away like 90% of it. And same goes for here. And then all of a sudden it doesn't look so bad. And then I added some color back in. So instead of it being gray and boring, I just made it a bit more blue. And it's like more technically, if we look at this, it's like technically more green, and it gets bluer and darker as we go back down. So that's the shadows done. And then the same thing for the highlights. If I can find it. There we go. Let's turn it back off. Let's look at the face. That's the moon. That's the hair. There we go. And we disable the mask. You can't really see much. But same thing applies. I established where I want my lighting to be, and then maybe I erased away some of the opacity. And the only thing is left is some post-processing. So I'm going to colorize the line art. I don't want it to be this black. I want it to be a bit more warm and more lifelike. So that's where this comes in. So you can see I started with a base of just kind of painting everything this pinkish. That did a lot of the heavy lifting, but I wasn't satisfied. I think there was too much chaos happening in the hair, so I made that all whitish, like desaturated it, made it more like its base color. Same thing for the chin here. Brought back some of the value, the darker colors in the eyelashes, in the eyebrows, technically in the jacket as well. Oh, and just some final touches like adding the star eyes and the reflections. There we go.